go to lesson 7. We're going to start finally getting back to where what we're doing here is going to match with your book. Not lesson number won't match up, but the stuff. So lesson 7 in your notebook, I think, will match up to what we're doing, your teaching notebook. So lesson 5, do a little quick review. It's been 3 weeks, I guess. We missed 3 weeks. So it's been, I guess, longer since we were here. The last time we talked about the Sadducees, compare them to the Pharisees, who were strict and all the traditions they kept up with and all this. Where the Sadducees looked at the first 5 books of the Old Testament, the books of Moses and the Torah, and that's where they got their stuff. They lived nothing with the traditions and things like that, but were very fixed on the Torah. And Jesus is going to use that in his condemnation of them, the very books that they use. Chief priests were Sadducees at this time, so that kind of gives you some idea of their end with that part. So when they come and bring this question about the woman that married all these different husbands and no children, what's going to be hers in the resurrection, Jesus told them, you're mistaken. You don't know the scriptures. You don't know the power of God. And what he used then, well, heaven won't be in marriage, but what he used from Mark 12:26 was said, you don't know Moses and the burning bush passage, which is in the very books that they claim to be what they get their stuff from. And so he used that passage because the way Moses used it there showed that he was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And they were supposed to be dead. They wouldn't be doing anything for Sadducees. They're gone, dead, gone. Nothing in the resurrection. But the way Moses referenced them, God referenced them, they were still living. And so that would refute what they were believing there. So he said, you're greatly mistaken. The greatest commandment, we talked about that a little bit, which one it is, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. The second one's like to it. And this is not to negate the 10 commandments. It just kind of summarizes all of them into 2, because the first part's about the commandments are loving God, obeying him, and the last part's about your relationship with your neighbor. So the scribe said you answered correctly with that. And then we have all these woes against the Pharisees we talked about. The main point from there is, Jesus said, do what they tell you to do, but don't do what they do. Or they don't do what they're preaching. That's what it amounts to. So do what they tell you, because they're sitting in Moses' seat. They're actually teaching you the law, but don't do what they practice. It's a big thing. So just a little quick catch up from last time. Okay. Matthew 24, who we're going to be tonight. I'm going to tell you up front, I'm going to put this out the way I see it. We're going to talk about some options. Everybody will agree with what I'm going to say about it. If we have some time left, we'll talk about it. If you've got a Bible that's got paragraph headings in it, where it tells the next paragraph's going to talk about this or this or this, this is one place in mind where I got some things scratched through, because the publisher of the Bibles, not the scripture, but the publisher puts the paragraph headings in. And there are several places that I don't agree with what they title it to. Most of them you do, but this is one where I have some problems with the way they generally title those things. So Jesus is leaving the temple, again, the apostles. And as far as we know, will be the last time he's in the temple before his death here. And as they leave, the disciples talk about the great beauty of the temple, what it is with all the stones. And beautiful structure and the stones. I'll talk about the stones in just a minute. Stones, according to Josephus, some of them were 70 feet long, 12 feet high, 18 feet wide. All right, I did some measuring. This room is about 12 feet high. This is a 4-foot section and an 8-foot section. This room is about 17 feet wide. So just go just out in the hall just a little bit. And this way you go to the next classroom, and about the middle of the door goes to Steve's office. One stone. That big. How they moved those things in that day and time, I have no idea. But that's what they say. Some of these stones are that large, and you can see some of them in the picture here, how big those things are. So it's a beautiful structure. It was, Herod's, of course, has spent 46 years. Herod's gone now, but started this thing 46 years, redoing it. One reference here, Josephus tells us the gifts of the offerings were adorned with crowns, shields, goblets, chains of gold presented by Agrippa, a gold vine with its vast clusters. The gift of Herod, temples built of white limestone, beauty and strength is admired by all the nations. So 46 years to finish it, 10,000 skilled workmen. I said they worked on it. The beauty of the physical temple. So they're leaving it, and the disciples are talking about how beautiful it is. And think about what it was representing. I don't think it represented that now. I don't think God was there in his presence now, the way they were acting. They didn't worshiping like they should have been. But go back to the tabernacle. This was the place where God dwelled among his people. And in the first temple, Solomon's temple. And probably in the second temple, Zerubbabel's temple. Until they got so off-skewed with their practices there. But this is a significant thing to the Jewish nation here. This is a computer-regenerated picture of the expansion that Herod made to the temple complex. Super large. I figured it one day, it's like almost 30 football fields in size, the whole thing. Very big. So Jesus tells the disciples that this great structure that they're looking at, that means so much to them, is going to be destroyed. Totally destroyed. Not one stone left on top of the other. That's why I mentioned these big stones here. I mean, they're going to all be broken down. You just got to think about what they're thinking about, what it means to these Jewish men he's talking to. Total shock that this beautiful structure is going to be totally torn down. Jesus is telling them about that. So they sit on the Mount of Olives. They go down, they leave the temple, go down through the Kidron Valley, and back up, and they're sitting on the Mount of Olives, looking back across at the temple. And the disciples asked Jesus to explain his statement here. And Mark says there's four of them that came to him privately, Peter, Andrew, James, and John, and asked him about this. Explain to us what you're saying here. And this is the picture of some of the stones. Look at the actual height of the land back in that very top edge up there. So this is down several layers from where it's been left preserved to see the stones that was broken down there. So what destruction, the question comes up, what destruction is being discussed? Is it and when we talk about the destruction of Jerusalem or destruction of the temple, those are the same thing. So if I say destruction of the temple or destruction of Jerusalem, just put them together. Because when Jerusalem was destroyed, the temple was destroyed. So it's the same event. So is it that it's talking about, or is it talking about destruction? It's going to come at the end of the world. In Matthew 24 and 25, really, there. So that's the question we got to deal with, start with. So, three options. The way people generally break this out. Three of them. Matthew 24 and the related passages in Mark and Luke. And we'll center on Matthew 24, but there's this referred to in the others too. Refers to the destruction of Jerusalem in 24, and then 25 is actually the second coming. So 24, all of 24 is about the destruction of Jerusalem with hints and comments about the end of time. But 25 is actually the end of time. Second coming, and all the destruction is coming. So that's one. Another one is that they're totally intermixed. You can't separate comments about the destruction of Jerusalem from comments about the end of time. The destruction is going to happen at that time. So both chapters are an intermixing of those two ideas. And then the third point is that the first part of Matthew 24, down through about verse 35, is about the destruction of Jerusalem, and from 35 or so forward, and all of 25, chapter 25, are the end of time, the second coming. Okay, so you got the three options. Like I said, I'm going to show you what I key in on. You don't have to agree with it. You just need to study it and understand for yourself how you see what you see. So, number one is 24 is one, 25 is the other. Destruction of Jerusalem and end of time. Second option is they're intermixed, and you really can't separate the two chapters. Are both talking about the two mixed together. Third option is 24 down through about verse 35 is destruction of Jerusalem, and then the rest of 24 and 25 are the end of time. So, in many respects, this is one of the most difficult parts of the New Testament. This is a statement from, I think I got this from Kyle Pope, who wrote Truth Magazine, or Truth Commentary on Matthew. Very hard chapter 24 to look at from his thing, and it is about a lot of people. I choose option 3, okay? But the first part of 24 down through about verse 35 is the destruction of Jerusalem, and then 35 or 36 forward is going to be talking about the second coming. And I'm going to explain to you why I take that. You don't have to agree with it, but I will try to explain my reasoning. The key verse is if you look at verse 34. So we'll go through this Matthew, the first part of 24 in a minute, but think about the first part of 24 being the destruction of Jerusalem. Go down to verse 35 then, where Jesus says, 34, I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things are fulfilled. And then verse 35, he says, heaven and earth will pass away, my word will not pass away. Which what I have said, what I just said, that this generation won't pass away until these things are fulfilled. What things? The things he just talked about. The things in the first part of 24. There'll be people that are alive then that would see those things happen. Okay, so that's one of the main reasons that I'll make the break there at that point. These things are going to happen while people are still alive, this generation. That's not what's said about the rest of it. Let's go through it a little bit. Okay, kind of back it up. They're leaving the temple, which is the last part of chapter 23 and the first part of chapter 24 there. It tells about this destruction that's going to come on the temple. Verse 2, do you not see all these things? Well, surely I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that will not be thrown down. That's the comment Jesus makes to them. So now they get across the Kidron Valley and sit down. Verse 3, he sat down on the Mount of Olives. Disciples came to him privately, saying, 2 questions. Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? They're going to ask 2 questions. There in verse 3. When will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? End of age is the end of time. Okay. Now, let me hasten to add this point. These things, when will these things be? Were the things he just said, which would be destruction of Jerusalem, destruction of the temple. Okay. I don't think the disciples at this point thought they were 2 separate events. I think they think this all will happen at the same time. The destruction of the temple he just talked about and his second coming will all be one event. They don't comprehend the fact that they're going to be separated. Jesus is going to separate them, I think. But I don't necessarily think that they thought they're talking about 2 separate things. Although they have a complete concept of the new kingdom yet, which they will have a little later on. So they envision the destruction of the temple as going to be the end of time. Why? The temple is everything to them. Acts 2 hasn't happened yet. Okay? So the temple, the Jewish worship, is everything. So you're going to destroy the temple, we're done. Okay? Kind of get the idea of that. Now, in 4 through 26, verse 4 through 26, there are some very specific things listed that are going to happen. Now keep in mind, I'm keying these two that'll happen before the destruction of Jerusalem. Okay? He mentions wars and rumors of wars, nation rises against nation, there'll be famines, there'll be tribulation, someone will be killed, you'll be hated by all nations, false prophets, lawlessness will abound, and false Christ will come. There's some of the things that he specifically lists that will happen in the coming days. Okay? All of these would happen before the destruction of the temple and destruction of Jerusalem, as they're keyed together here. Verses 27 through 31 are the difficult verses. because they use an Old Testament style figurative language to describe how this is going to go on. Some of the same type of language you get back in some of the prophets as it goes through this. So it's very difficult to read and tie into this the way I feel about it. Now, the events listed in 36 forward are different. No one knows the day or hour. It's like when the flood came in Noah. Nobody knew when it's going to happen. Okay? It's not tied to specific events that you can see these things are going to happen. There's going to be there. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Watch. You don't know when the Lord's coming. You don't know when a thief comes. It's all uncertain. The master of service wasn't expecting the master to come back. They was beating the servants. So all these things are very uncertain of when they're going to happen. They're surprise type things. These other things that we talked about are more definitive, if you will. Also, if you look in the first part down through verse 25, you'll see the use of the word days. They're talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. Look in verse 19, 22, and 29. All of them use the days, plural. So it's going to be a longer period of time during this destruction of Jerusalem. The tribulation, the things that are going to happen. Actually, the Romans were actually building up siege ramps and all this thing for 2 or 3 years, 4 years maybe. Actually, when they first started, before they actually, the destruction of Jerusalem actually occurred. Did you get past that? It's always day. No one knows the day or the hour when the Son of Man is coming. It all references a day where things are going to happen like now. The unsurprised. In Noah's day, they didn't know what happened because it was a quick event that's going to happen. So it refers to that day and hour. So it's a difference in the way, the terminology there, as opposed to this is going to take some time to unfold, or this is going to happen, bingo, done, type thing. That makes sense what I'm trying to say. Now, what happens with the destruction of Jerusalem? The temple is everything to them. That's where they come, where God's presence was before. I don't think they're there now because of their ignoring the law, I guess is the best way to put it. That's the center of their worship. All the adult males had to come 3 times a year to the temple. Think of how many thousands of animals have been sacrificed in the temple. I mean, this is the center of the Jewish nation because the Jewish nation, their religion and their state and their government is all tied together into one. So you destroy the temple and you destroyed everything to them. So that's what's going to happen. Significant. If you destroyed Jerusalem, you destroyed the nation as far as they're concerned. I also think this is, you can take this as the signaling of the end of one dispensation and the other. Destroying the temple, taking it out when it occurs, takes Judaism out of the picture as far as those who want to be Christians. Remember all the struggles going to go on in the early part of Acts? Acts 15, the conference where you've got to become a Jew before you be a Christian. Wiping out the temple takes all that out. No, not that Acts 15 didn't take it out, but physically it takes it out. Okay. It's going to be destroyed by Rome in AD 70, which is about 40 years from now. So there'll be some that will still be alive when this happened there. Final punishment for the Jewish nation because they rejected Jehovah. The actual, I don't think if I got a slide here or not. The actual destruction starts under Nero. Nero's the emperor in Rome, and Vespasian is the general that's there in Jerusalem, building up the siege around it. And Nero dies. Vespasian goes back to be the emperor, and Titus, his son, takes over the destruction of Jerusalem. So for this period of time. Now, this is the key, I think, you talk about what you do to your students. God did not make the Jews reject Christ. They did that, and God used that to accomplish his purpose. So I think when you think about, we get in this whole story here with the death of Christ, that's a big point where they get everybody to understand. God doesn't make people be bad. God uses their wickedness to accomplish his purpose. And that's true through the Old Testament too. Over and over you see that kind of thing happen. But God didn't make them reject Christ. He used their wickedness to complete his purpose, his plan. So, I'm kind of wrapping back around, going through some things again now. We already talked about some things that are going to happen before the destruction of Jerusalem. I kind of had that list a while ago. Here's the again. Deceivers, others will come claiming to be the Christ. And you say, when they do, don't follow them, don't go after them. They're false. Don't go chase them here or there. Somebody says the Christ is over there, don't go, because that's not him. So false Christ will come. Wars, famine, pestilence, earthquakes, all these things are definitive that are going to happen. False prophets, lawlessness. And he tells about what happens when you see these things coming, what are you going to do? Well, if you get the Roman army coming in to seize Jerusalem, what are you going to try to do? Get out, go, run, flee. Don't go back and get your clothes, he says. If you're pregnant, or if you're nursing, or if it happens on the Sabbath where you can't travel, you can't get out and go. If it happens in the wintertime, he mentions. All this is a problem to you because you're trying to flee, you're trying to get out. What's going to happen in the second coming? None of that kind of stuff, because there's no running at that point. But he mentions all these things here. Pray it's not in the winter, you're not pregnant. Great desolation, nothing like you've seen before. They take down this big, beautiful building, wipe out the whole center of the Jewish religion, and destroy Jerusalem. 27 through 31 is the difficult part. He mentions the fact it's going to be swift as lightning, because and I know this thing's kind of contradictory because it took some time for the Romans to seize Jerusalem and do that. But to the Jew who doesn't believe this is going to happen, and it does, it'd be like the carcass is being ripped up by the eagles. It's going to be a destruction like they can't imagine when Jerusalem is destroyed and the temple is gone. There. Yeah, here it is. I didn't remember if I had this slide in here or not. Romans would tear it apart, like ripping apart a dead carcass. That's what the words that some use. Nero's the emperor. Vespasian's the general there. Nero dies. Vespasian goes back and made emperor, and his son Titus completes it. Now, interesting point here. Titus goes to bed at night, according to Josephus. He goes to the Antonia Forum, the place where the Romans were present there in Jerusalem. And he's told them to save the temple, this beautiful structure. Told his Roman army not to destroy the temple. During the night, there was a band of resistance, Jews who were still in the city of Jerusalem, even though the Roman army had infiltrated the city. And they stirred up a fight between them and the Roman soldiers. In the process of that, the temple got burned, caught on fire. And that's how the destruction came, even though Titus had given the order not to destroy it. So what's that got to do with all the stones being torn down? Okay, you got a fire going, all this gold in the temple. According to Josephus' writings and others, all this gold melts, runs down the cracks of this walls of the temple and the city. And these Roman soldiers, in the process of trying to retrieve that gold, rip the city apart. Because they want the gold that's there. That's melted in the burning of the temple. Oh, that's true or not? And that's what some of the writers write about this going on. They want from that. So the Roman legions surround the city, begin to slow squeeze the life out of the Jewish stronghold. By the year 70, they breach the city outer walls, begin this systematic ransacking of the city, and culminated in the burning and destruction of the temple. This was the center of Judaism. So the city is going to fall in 70 AD. Jesus used the example of a fig tree. And he says, when you see the fig tree and you see the leaves start coming out, then you know summer's coming. So he said, when you see these armies come in and start to seize the city, that's the sign for you to run and get out because destruction is near. That's the parallel he uses for the fig tree there. It's near, at the door, in other words. It's there, it's about to happen. Again, he makes that statement, this generation will not pass away till all these things are fulfilled. Now, shift to the second question. Remember, they asked two questions. When will these things happen? And then second question, what will be the signs of your coming and the end of the age? Now you shift to the second question, signs of his coming. He says, no one knows except my Father. It's going to be like in the days of Noah. Nobody expected a flood. Noah's building this ark. He didn't know when it's going to start raining. And surely the people around him know it's going to start raining. It's going to be a flood. No warning. The flood starts coming, and for 4 days you got rain, and it's done. It's there, unexpectedly. No one knows when a thief's coming. If you did, you prepare your house and be sitting up there with a shotgun waiting on him, right? You don't know when a thief's coming. It's totally unknown. Same with the end of time. None of us know. Nobody knows except the Father, he says, when the end of time is coming. No one knows the day or the hour, specific points there. So what's your option? Be ready all the time. Why do you lock your door when you leave the house? Because you don't know if a thief's coming or not, right? So you're ready. Prepare yourself. Son of Man's coming an hour when you don't expect it. And that's the scary part for all of us. That statement there, Son of Man's coming when you don't expect it. What's your challenge? Be ready all the time. He says, blessed are the ones prepared. Woe to those who are not. There's going to be weeping and gnashing of teeth for those who aren't prepared when that event, that day and hour hits. We're in the second part of the question now. And I've hurried through it. I'm going to have a lot of time left, I guess, but I want to make sure I got all of it in. 2 or 3 points. This had been the very place of the presence of God. I don't think that point can be overlooked. To the Jewish nation, the tabernacle, Solomon said, remember the prayer that Solomon prayed when his temple was finished, that anytime we're out somewhere and we have a problem, we stumble, we sin or whatever, we can turn toward the temple and pray to you, pray to your presence there for help. And he goes on to say in his prayer that I know you don't reside in the temple, you reside in the heavens. But that's your place among us. That's where we're going to look to and pray. So that was God's presence among the people. And the same thing with the temple that Zerubbabel built when he came back from captivity. It was God's presence among them. So you take that out. You take that away from them. And what do they have left except this big, beautiful building? That was an important point to the Jews. So where's the temple now? We don't have that beautiful structure, that beautiful building. So what do we learn and read in the New Testament? Your bodies are the temple of the Holy Ghost. Right. So leaving the stone monument as a memorial for ourselves is not nearly as important as leaving a godly example of our life. Rocks will be thrown away. You see things on tombstones that says, gone but not forgotten. I read a piece the other day, how many generations it takes till that person's forgotten. I think it was 4. 4 generations that people won't know who's buried in a certain spot. Doesn't matter anymore. Pass it out. I haven't been out to see my dad's parents' grave for years. I'll throw the road go sometimes. See if the rocks are still standing up. Some of you do. That's a form of time when just the generations go on and you don't think about that.
To that point, has my kids ever been with you too? Kind of for generations. My kids, I don't think have ever been there.
No, probably not. Don't know where it is. But the example I can leave could very well last for several generations. Now, back to this point I was trying to make earlier about this. God, and we just got to get that, make sure the kids understand this. God doesn't make anybody do wrong. They're going to crucify Christ. The kids will say, no. Why were they so mean to him? Well, that was God's plan from before the foundations of the world, that he would have to pay the debt for men's sins. Prophesied all through the Old Testament. So did he make these people do this? No, but he used their anger and their hate to do it. I think that's a key point to get them to understand the difference between God using people, their choices, versus making them do something to accomplish his purpose. Yeah, it's only hours away till the punishment's coming for Christ. And then, blessed are those who are prepared. We don't know when that day and hour is coming. We have to be prepared all the time. Probably another point we start drilling into the kids at some age too. Always. Okay. I know somebody's got a different idea about this whole chapter and the rate points and whatever. I mean, I'm not trying to force mine on anybody. I try to explain where I see the break and why. If you want to see it different, that's fine. Chapter 25, most everybody agrees 25 is the end of time. It's the coming of Christ, second coming of Christ. It's how it breaks in 24 is generally the question. So, all right, thoughts from somebody? How you gonna deal with this with your kids? This is time for sharing the ideas and whatever. You see points here you can use with your kids. That's what you'll be doing next quarter, folks.
Can you show your last slide?
Do what?
Can you go back?
Last one, yeah. That one?
Yeah. So I was thinking about, there's this healthy way to talk about preparedness versus also a healthy way to talk about the fear of God, the respect, the reverence. And there's a blend there. You know, sometimes I think we have to be careful not to teach one versus the other or overshadow one versus the other. And as you were going through this and this whole concept of preparedness and the woes and all of that kind of leads up to this kind of discussion here. We have to make sure we're getting that point across.
I wonder sometimes if we use the word fear God to our kids, what they think of when they would think of the word fear? Afraid of, right? So we have to be careful with that if they understand fear is a reverence, a respect. It's not a fear I'm afraid of. That makes sense?
And you show that respect in your preparedness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're closest to God. You don't say, I'm not afraid of God. I respect him. I have an awe or awesomeness that he is. But the term is fear God. But the fear is a different word from what we think of being afraid of a ghost type thing. Okay? That's another point I think we just stress sometimes. Somebody else? How much time we got left? That clock back there is way off. So I couldn't tell exactly where I was. 36. We got 3 or 4 minutes.
Just in verse 36 of that day and hour, and at least the older kids can actually tie 36 back, I think 3 or 4, that's where there's multiple questions, and now we come back to the last question of that day and hour, no one knows, right? So the language itself speaks to 36 being that transition point.
Yeah, I see. That's it. I don't think, from what he said, Jesus said no. They may know now, I don't know. But at that point, I don't think Jesus, he said, only the Father knows when that day and hour is going to happen. Now, I don't know if it's ascension back to God, if he knows now when it's going to happen. I don't know. No matter. What's my job? Be ready. Okay, whatever it is.
That's like what Hayden Mix said in his talk. I don't know if I remember, it was a Wednesday night talk. He said, you never have to get ready if you're already ready.
Yeah, you stay ready.
And that's just,
Yeah, just stay ready, right?
Make them stick with kids, because that applies to
Yep,
a lot of things.
yep, yeah.
Like that, I think, I try to tell the kids, like, getting ready, that preparedness, there's gonna be mistakes. That's part of that. I mean, you have the standard, only Jesus was perfect. You're to strive to that standard. You're to be prepared, and to be prepared means you have to know it. You have to know it. I mean, you have to read it. You have to, if you haven't even, if I open the scriptures and I don't know what it says, how am I possibly be prepared? Because it's not, parents help prepare their children, but you're also trying to make them understand that the preparedness is them preparing themselves. I guess that's the other transition, is we're helping these kids grow. I always wonder the switch. Starting to make that maturity.
But still, there's a lot of teaching to do even after that. Right.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
So,
yep. And that day and hour, that's where I see the division. And I think you can help them understand that all this time of instruction is Jerusalem. They're going to see that coming. He says, when you see it coming, run, flee, don't go back to get your clothes, all these things that, this is going to be something you can recognize is coming. The day and hour, I mean, was it 2 Thessalonians, twinkling of an eye and sound of a trumpet and whatever, and it's done. I mean, there's no warning. You got a warning of destruction. Jerusalem's coming. You're going to see them start. The army's coming in, and you out in the field, you don't go back. You run. You're not going to see this one coming.
maybe we should try to encourage the idea that it's a joyful thing to look forward to, not scared like, oh my, it's coming, that this is what we want.
Right. Yeah. And
This is what, like Mr. Chandler,
yeah.
if he lives prepared, then it should be a joyous thing.
And that's a great point, because there is sorrow and crying and anguish when somebody dies because of the physical separation. But we think everybody, all of us have to understand that's what we're living for. Okay?
Well, the little ones don't understand when you say you get to go live with God. So that's scary to them because they want to stay with mom and dad.
Yeah, sure. Yep.
So maybe we need to encourage that this is a great thing. This is a joyful time. This is something we all want. This is a good thing.
And you don't choose when you die. I mean, that's the other point you make. Let's go back to this be ready all the time type thing.
But when Jesus comes, it should be a great day.
Yes, sure.
Well, I was kind of thinking about along the lines of Tammy is there's some like very basic things here where it's talking about Jesus was warning them that this punishment was going to come because of the nation and plus rejected him. So there's a mercy that I think kids can understand from a parent's point of view. Your parents will warn you not to go down a path. And they'll tell you, if you go down this path, this is what you're going to find. But if they're being fair and just, you're going to get the punishment if you do whatever you're doing. Kids can understand that because they've experienced that. And that's a lot of what's going on in this passage is Jesus is warning them of the things that are going to happen because of the rebellion of the nation. But he's also giving them the signs, like there's road signs all along the way to avoid having to be caught in that horrible disaster.
Well, look how much time they have had. And they got the initial punishment of the 70 years, and they still came back and couldn't do it and couldn't do it and couldn't do it. I mean, this is just, it's not like, God doesn't want to punish us.
Right, that's a very loving thing to point out, that he's trying to do everything he can do, and even to take them back to where this starts at the end of 23, where he's saying, well, he's weeping over them.
Mhm.
I have wanted
Yes.
to bring you to me, and you just won't let me. You just are so stubborn and rebellious.
Yep.
He loved them.
Yep. Yeah, so much. He gave his son for all of us.